there's a principle here that you have to understand. If you are unwilling for things to be a certain way, if you have resistance to any extent to things being the way they are, then your resistance is going to simply perpetuate things being the way they are. And one of the hardest lessons for all of us to learn is that if we want to heal something in particular, we have to be completely willing for it not to heal. And that's a very, very hard one.
Repeat.
In order to heal something, you have to be completely and utterly willing for it not to heal. Because if you're not willing for it to stay the way it is, then you're resisting. And like, for example, if I had continued to resist having a bad knee, if I had been unwilling for my knee to not heal, that in and of itself would have been enough to keep the knee in the shape it was in. Because whatever you resist, you perpetuate. Whatever you resist, you persist. So if you have a bad knee, in this example, and you resist having a bad knee, then you will continue to have that bad knee as long as you keep resisting having that bad knee.
Or a breast cancer. Or a breast cancer. Or a bad toe. Or deafness.
I think this may sound like an odd statement, but I think one of the reasons my knees responded so quickly was because I had all the problems with the colon. And as soon as I started getting rid of the corn and fuzzies, that kind of made it a lot easier not to worry so much about my knee. And so, the odd thing about it was I came into body electronics initially very, very narrowly focused on my knees. I wasn't really looking for anything else when I first heard about it. I thought, this is great, I can get my knees fixed up.
He didn't care a bit about his nephews, just his niece.
I never thought about it, John. I just had another niece born the other day, and I still don't have any nephews, so maybe I'm still resisting knees. At any rate, what's that? Okay. So the thing about it is that because of the other problems that started to come up, specifically the colon, I didn't focus a lot on my knees. I think that made it a little bit easier for me to let go of the focus on the knees. But the bottom line is, as John has said, we have to let go of our resistance to not healing. We have to be perfectly willing to not heal. It's like on the one hand, you got to be perfectly willing to not get better. No attachment to outcomes. This is what David was talking about the other day. No attachment to outcomes. While simultaneously you're doing everything within your power to bring about that exact outcome. If we refer this back to the concept of meditation that I believe Ian was asking about, if I remember correctly, you have on the one hand your ability to focus your attention to the encompassment of all things, where there's total non-resistance there. So if you can come from that perspective where it's okay for something not to heal, this is where you're coming from a state of non-resistance, a state of encompassment. Only if you can do that first, in other words, only if you can focus your attention to the encompassment of all things first, will you then be able to effectively focus your attention to the exclusion. In other words, focus narrowly on one particular outcome. Am I confusing people here? It has to take place within a greater framework of non-resistance. You can't just go straight to the narrow focus, because that's just going to be sheer resistance, and all you'll end up doing is perpetuating the very thing you're trying to change. But if you can come from a broader framework of non-resistance, that's what will make it effective to then very deliberately and very pointedly work to bring about a certain result, and yet remain unattached to the outcome there. Do you have anything? Okay. Well, at any rate, I went back through the knee operation a number of times, and at the time that this operation happened, it was what they call an arthroscopic knee surgery, which means they've got the little kind of camera thing inside you so they can see what they're doing. So I had 3 different little scars that were formed on the knee, and one of the scars was right about there, which is the scar that they have to, that's where they go in to take out the cartilage. I had a second scar that was over right about in this area, and I think that's where there was a second and a third. The second was here, and the third is up here, and these other.
Where is here to the tape?
Okay, there was the first scar was on the medial side of the knee, and it would have been where they would have been going in to take out the cartilage. The second scar was on the lateral side of the right knee here, and then there was another scar laterally, but above the kneecap on the right knee. These second and third scars, I'm actually trying to remember which was which, but one of them was where they sort of regulated the fluid inside the knee, and the other was where they put the little fiber optic camera thing so the surgeon can watch what he's doing. What I experienced after going through the operation after a certain point is 2 out of these scars disappeared. 2 out of the 3 scars have disappeared completely. This scar here on the medial side of the knee, there's absolutely no trace whatsoever. Even if you know exactly where to look out here, you can't find the slightest trace of a scar there anywhere. I mean, you can look at it with an eye loop or whatever, and there's just absolutely no trace of there ever having been a scar there. Same thing here on the lower lateral scar. There's no trace whatsoever of there ever having been a scar there. The skin looks absolutely totally normal. And the third scar that's up slightly lateral and above the kneecap, there's basically you can still tell there's a bit of a scar there. There's not really any thickness or dimension to it, but you can still see a bit of a scar there. Now, the very fact that there's a scar there still would indicate that I still haven't gone through the operation 100%. Because if you've totally gone through something, absolutely 100%, then there's not going to be any, and you've totally gone back through it with no resistance, then even the third scar would disappear as well.
Are you planning to talk about Arthur Bartholomew Flick?
So, at any rate, a lot of times when you have something like that happen in your body, of course, everybody wants you to prove it. And I wasn't all that keen on the idea of cutting my knees open just to prove something to somebody else. I was pretty happy with the way they were functioning, and that was good enough for me. Didn't want any more radioactive dye injected inside so they could take X-rays and see what was going on there. At one of John's seminars, about a year and a half after I'd been on the program, there was an orthopedic surgeon that came out to the seminar in Maui. His name was Dr. Arthur Flick, or Dr. Bart, as we called him, and he was a top orthopedic surgeon in the United States. And when he heard the story there, he asked if he could examine my knees and establish, just from the outside, just kind of twisting my knee, ankles, what I mean, just manipulating the legs and playing with it and all that. And I said, sure, that'd be fine. And so he gave my knees a real good going over there, and he was quite surprised, coming from his more traditional background, because see, the doctors, if I go back just a moment, when I first had the cartilage tear, the surgeon that did the surgery was he was the father of one of my friends from junior high and high school. So I mean, I knew him pretty well. I'd known him since I was around 12 or 13. So I mean, he'd put up with more for me than I guess he would for most people. He's a very, very wonderful man. And I remember asking him, well, how come if I got a rip in my cartilage, how come it doesn't just grow back? And he would go, well, because it doesn't. And I would say, well, how come? And he'd say, well, because it doesn't. And I go, well, how come? And he'd say, well, because it doesn't. So we finally got to the next level of understanding, and I said, well, why? And I figured I'd better ask a different question, so I said, well, why not? And he said, because it doesn't have any blood supply. And I said, well, how come? And he said, well, because it doesn't. And we went through that a little bit more. But the thing to realize is that the doctors don't believe that cartilage ever repairs itself. They know that if you break a leg, the bone will grow back, but they don't really believe that cartilage is capable of regeneration. So at any rate, he checked out my left knee, which was the one that hadn't had the operation, but had the ligament damage and the cartilage tearing and all that. And he said that my left knee was absolutely 100% perfect, and that there was absolutely no way there was a tear in the cartilage there any longer. It was absolutely 100%. He said my right knee, which was the one that had the cartilage taken out, he said as far as he could tell, the cartilage was absolutely 100% there. And it was no longer torn. So, Lewis. No, well, I haven't really lived back in Massachusetts since then. I've gone back in a few visits, but I didn't think it was necessary. At any rate, he said that the cartilage had definitely regenerated. It had definitely grown back, and it was there 100%, and it was completely healthy. It was completely without any tears. The one thing that he did say in my right knee was that on the other side, like the cartilage had been taken out on the inside, on the medial side, he said on the lateral side there was still a little bit of instability in the ligaments there. There wasn't any tearing or the ligaments weren't severed or anything, but there was a bit of like they were just kind of loose. And I would tend to agree with that. I think there is I'd say my right knee is probably 95%. And then, of course, that's where the scar still is, that one scar on the top. So I suspect there's still a bit more work to do there, and maybe somewhere along the line I'll be able to get to the next intensity of trauma there.
I brought this out, asked Doug to bring this out here, to show you that if cartilage will grow back, then you've got nerve supply and circulation growing back. If it will grow back in, say, 1.5 inches of cartilage that was surgically removed, what does that tell you about muscles? What will that tell you about other substances in the body? And we've already brought this out to you. And this is not what body electronics does for the person. It's what the person does by re-experiencing that trauma to close up the unconsciousness that was incurred by injury or by operation. And so these are things we want to go back. Now let's go back to holes in the aura.
Wow. I've been sitting up here so long that I've been seriously considering eating this apple in front of me. But I want to talk about my experiences with entities. And like as Casper the Friendly Ghost might say, don't spook until you're spoken to. But there is a... See, I can do it too, Doug. It's not something that we do talk about a lot, but my experiences have been that they're not a big deal. Now, before you jump down my neck, it's like, what happens, when a soul passes on from this lifetime and they still have some attachments or some resistances, and they're not going to make their ascension. So, depending, they may be still thinking about the things here on planet Earth. They might have had a lot of money in the bank, or they might want to make sure their wife doesn't run around with someone else or something like that. But they tend to hang around the planet. Now, they're not bad. This is my opinion. They're not bad. They're just confused. And they'll hang around here until they get some understanding that this is just a school and they can get themselves a new body and come back again. Now, there will be entities around here because there's a lot of information around here that they need to know. And so, that they're here. But if we are afraid of that fact, then we empower them. And it's like they need, a lot of these souls need what I call meals and lodging. They need a little shot, and they need to move in on us and like steal a bit of our energy, if you like. Like John describes it as moving in through a hole in our aura. And another way, which I look at it, my background is like in radio and frequencies and sound waves and so on. And it's like each of us resonates at a certain vibration. And when we're relaxed, that vibration is different to when... I'll speak for myself, okay? When I'm relaxed, my vibration is different to when I'm uptight. And so when I'm relaxed, that is not the frequency that a confused soul is on. And when I'm relaxed, I'm invisible. I don't even appear on their radar screen. They can't find me. Now, there's a lot of souls around who'd like to find me because, for lifetimes and eons of time, that there's been these attachments. And, as we spoke about, there are some religions that get married for eternity, like the Mormons are one of them. Can you imagine that? It's bad enough till death do us part sort of thing, but for getting married for eternity, it's like, anyway, so the soul will, forget all about that stuff and reincarnate again and get themselves a new spouse. But that soul still remembers, you promised to love me for eternity. And sort of, they hang around. And if you've had the experience, you get into a relationship and all of a sudden things go topsy-turvy and you go, wow, what happened, And the chances are that entity got involved there somehow and cranked things up, So it's good to be aware of them, but they're not a big deal. In fact, they're just like people you'd meet on the street. This is the majority of them, and they are, they're just ordinary citizens who've jumped off the planet. And anyway, so like my experiences, like they've come from over like 25 years and through more than 60 countries. And so this is not stuff I read in books, but the way that I've worked with entities is from an attitude to be of service, not to be afraid. And the idea is that, if each of us do have these souls that can come around us sometimes, it could be, have you ever had the experience, you get a little bit angry, and then all of a sudden, wow, you overreact, and, it's really cranked up, and you think, wow, that's not like me, I don't normally do that. And it wasn't you either, you had a little help there in that situation, that soul moved in and, and once you're relaxed again, that soul can't find you. Anyway, so Doug is supposed to be going to do a decree sort of thing sooner or later, but it's like, what I would say is that don't do it with like fear in your hearts or there's someone that, whoa, you really got to stay out there, Bubby. True, that we ought not let them infringe upon us personally, on our aura. But, they're confused. They're going to hang around until they get some understanding, and then they'll be back again doing body electronics.
Thank you very much. For every point of view, you have a conflicting point of view. That's the way life is, all right? From our experience in body electronics, what we have found is after a person has been out on a good drunk, and they're all tied up and uptight, what have you, and they have a good hole in their auric field as they fall out of the tavern, and they hit their head on the curb, and they're out for a while and end up in a hospital after an operation under anesthesia. They have a great big hole in their auric field, and that's been filled. Now they're back to normal again, and they're no longer uptight. But in the meantime, they've had an entry, and they have a nice little entity sitting inside of them that they didn't expect to have, sapping their energy field from that time on. So it's not a matter of just being uptight. I want to make this as clear as I can, and then having a little bother with an entity then, and then as soon as we could get back to a good, calm, peaceful state, having the entity leave. It doesn't happen that way. Because as long as a person has that suppressed unconsciousness that they haven't dealt with, that they can't make peace with, they haven't got over that resistance yet, they're stuck with that entity. And they're stuck with that entity until that entity is removed through the memory of that which has been suppressed through the trauma. Now that's something I just want you to consider. There's different ways of looking at this. Yes, sir.
No, that's not a conflicting point of view to me at all. It's like I'm saying, when I'm relaxed, they're not affecting me. They might be hanging around, just waiting for the moment when I'm either fearful or uptight or jealous or overly proud or any of those emotions, when they can come in on that vibration. But they definitely are still around. Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Okay, that point's cleared up because it's these little things are really important for us. My kahuna teacher one time told me, he says that many of the kahunas who are Hawaiian are very, very upset that he'd so much as speak and teach a white man. And I said, well, how do you protect yourself? He says, I just speed up my energy field and make myself so loving. We'll use that word loving. He uses the word speeds up. He just speeds up and puts himself beyond the reach of any of the entities that are sent to him through the death curse. Now, this death curse is very real. The sorcerers are able to contact the astral realm directly, make a pact with the entities that are there to go out and destroy somebody. And you can have a lot of this done in sorcery. You have a lot of this done in the black arts. You have a lot of it done with the sorcery type taungas and the sorcery type kahunas. And they have that ability to make a pact And they have to pay for that pact, but they can send a spirit out, and the spirit has to make an arrangement. They usually they get the better of the deal, and they send them out and can kill a person. Now, in Africa, you have a lot of voodoo. In South America, especially Brazil, you have a lot of voodoo. Now, don't discount these things, folks. These things are real. These people have gone through the rites of passage, and they have made it possible to contact the spirits in the astral realm that are not friendly. And these people, you make an agreement with them, they'll go out and kill somebody, as long as they get the better end of the deal. Now, for those people who are born and raised in Africa, voodoo is a very common thing. Is that correct, Sama? Now, that's something that we have to look at. Now, I think that Esther's been aware of this too, in her experiences in Africa, working in the Christian society. Now, the point of it all is once you have a knowledge as to how to handle these things, you don't have to worry about them. If they're like paper tigers, they have no power. They only have power that you give them. Okay? Now, let's get on a little bit. Doug, would you please bring up, from your experience, other ways where holes in the aura can be formed?
Just one quick thing before that. In line with what Peter has pointed out here, the thing to realize is when you're dealing with these entities, like, for example, if we become aware of an entity in a particular individual and that entity is sent to the light of God, bear in mind that this is not shall we say, a destructive act on our part. This is not killing the entity or destroying the entity. It's actually liberating the entity. It's allowing the entity to go back up there and get recycled and eventually have the opportunity to come back down in a body of its own so that it can make further progress. There's been a number of people involved in body electronics over the years who have certain sensitivities to where they can see things that maybe most people would not see. And what's been very frequently reported at seminars is that as entities are leaving and they're moving up in this direction, you actually have coming down from above what some will term the search and rescue teams that are here to actually help and assist that entity. Now, how many people here are aware of this? Okay, good. So the thing to realize here is we're not killing the entities or harming the entities. Quite the opposite. We're being of very great service to the entity.
Recycling is very much in vogue. Recycling is very much in vogue these days.
Now, some people might take the position, well, are we not, by casting out the entity, are we not in some way or another infringing upon the free agency of the entity? The thing to realize is, for all intents and purposes, that entity no longer has any free agency. They're totally trapped in your auric field, and they're by their own intense resistance, and they're not capable of free choice in the matter. So ultimately, there isn't any free agency to step on here. Should we handle some of the questions? Okay. What John wants to cover here before we get to the questions is some of the many things that will result in holes in the aura, which will leave you wide open to entity involvement. One of the ones that's fairly obvious that John has covered is going to be your unconsciousness that's induced by anesthesia. And this is something that I'm sure many people here have experienced at some time in their life. Probably a lot of people here were cesarean section and were maybe even born unconscious. So there's all sorts of different ways that you would have the anesthesia or the unconsciousness. Alcohol and drugs, whether recreational or psychiatric or pharmaceutical, all sorts of different influences there can bring about gaping holes in the aura and make a person very, very open to entity involvement. Another great source of unconsciousness.
I remember in a VNC class that we had up in Maui, Hawaii. We couldn't prove it, but we had 4 people that made no more progress, and they seemed to have nothing happening. And what we found is when we had a big picture taken, we had 4 people with all this ectoplasm coming up on the photographic plate. And those 4 people were all on ecstasy when we got down to the bottom of it. And where ecstasy was one thing which just blows holes in the auric field terribly. We have found that out by our own experience, and that anybody on ecstasy that thinks that this is helping them open up their energy patterns and have emotional, gets in touch with their emotions. This is really bad news. It creates such holes in the auric field and destroys the immune system that these people we found, remember on the photographic plates there, they had all this ectoplasm coming out of their bodies at that time. And then we understood what was going on.
LSD, mushrooms, oh, absolutely. Any of you, but even marijuana. I mean, any of the drugs are going to do the same thing.
Marijuana is a painkiller, and that we have found by working with people with marijuana, there's a large degree and a number of entities involved with them, and that stays there for years until the marijuana is removed from the body. The holes in the aura are then filled up, which takes a while, and then the person is free of the entities.
Another thing that will create tremendous holes in the aura will be electric shock, and that will be, of course, your electric shock therapy. I'm a little bit hesitant to use the word, but that's what they call it, I guess, your electric shock therapy, but also electric shocks that happen just by accident. I mean, people get hit by lightning, people get their finger in a light socket, people get shocked by the toaster, the hair dryer, or whatever. So anything that involves electric shock to the body, electric fences for that matter, anything that involves electric shock is going to put a certain degree of numbness or unconsciousness into the body. Now, another thing that John's alluded to here several times will be a lot of your shamanic practices, a lot of your sorcery-type practices, which will leave a person very, very wide open towards to all sorts of influence from the astral realm. There's a lot of this sort of thing that's gone on in various cultures around the world, and it's actually far more common even in the Western cultures than most people are prepared to acknowledge. There's a lot of witchcraft out there. There's a lot of devil worshipping. There's a lot of things that go on somewhere off in the woods or behind closed doors that perhaps most average people aren't aware of, but these things are quite commonplace. Another thing that we should mention here, which I'm sure has probably been experienced by a number of people here in this room, is going to be your firewalking. This is something that in our experience will lock a tremendous amount of unconsciousness into the body.
We've had a large number of people in our seminars that have gone through firewalks. We have had them through our advanced work, and they have re-experienced the firewalk. How many people in here have gone through the firewalk? May I see a show of hands? Okay, now let me ask you very sincerely, starting with David Whistler. David, what happens when you go back and re-experience the firewalk? Do you burn? You haven't cleared it yet. Okay, you will. We have had a number of people who have cleared it. And where a firewalk, you walk across hot coals at a very high temperature. And it's all suppressed below the level of consciousness. It all suppressed below the level of consciousness. Take a look at the reflex points on your feet. They have to do with every single point on the human body. And when you go through that firewalk, the person doesn't feel the heat, but later on when they get into body electronics, there's tremendous numbness that comes off, and then they go through the stages gradually of all of this, of the emotional scale as they come up through it, and then they burn. And sometimes they burn for days. Now, we had one lady from Germany who took the VNC class in Maui. And she had gone through the firewalk, and she didn't tell us about it. And she was in the techniques that we use, and all of a sudden, there she was with her feet burning off. And that went on for a couple of days. And then finally, the memories started coming back of reliving the firewalk in full detail. And let me go back and look at exactly the word pattern she says. She quoted this: I have to go through the fire to prove myself to God. Now, if you study very carefully the Old Testament, you will find that the ancient Baal, B-A-A-L, and a lot of these various rites of passage from those things that were forbidden in the Bible, they were told that if you go through the fire walk, you cut yourself off from God. The children of the parents were forbidden not to go through the fire walk. And that we found through our work that people who go through the fire walk, regardless of how sincere they are, we're not questioning sincerity, but when they've gone through the fire walk, they have to go back and go through the burning that they have suppressed. And when they have done so, they have overcome one of the greatest primal energies that you can deal with. That primal energy is fire. You have your earth, air, fire, and water. And you have one end of it, you have your shamanic methods of dealing with it, which bring a person into the involutionary spiral. When you deal with fire, beginning with the fire of the Kundalini and so on, you have those things that bring you to on the ascensional spiral or evolutionary spiral. Now these things are interesting because the people involved in body electronics who've gone through the fire walk have overcome the most powerful burning that they have ever experienced. I'm going to mention the name of Babaji Lance. Last class is here. His feet burned for days. And finally, the feet stopped burning. Finally, the feet straightened out, and all the bones in the feet and everything straightened out with cranial work, with more burning. And finally, he felt wonderful about it. And one day, he was just simply having his points held, and his hands started to burn. And they burned like fire, and they burned there for a few hours just like fire. And then suddenly he remembered that when he went through the fire walk, he got down on all fours and crawled around on those red-hot coals about 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit, and he got his hands down in the coals. Now, it's not just the feet that went through that re-experiencing of the suppressed pain, but it's also the hands that he went through. And since that time, Babaji has turned into a real spiritual being with tremendous powers of mental perception and tremendous dedication and understanding and connection to God. Prior to that time, he was trying to. Now he's doing it. And this is something that's beautiful to see, because many of us are in the position of overcoming that which we have inherited from our ancestors, which we've done to ourselves. And remember, it's the heart of the person that we must consider and not condemn them for doing what they've done. Do you follow me? But, now this is, I hope Doug remembers this. We had a whole lot of people that went through the fire walk. And they took the visualization and consciousness class. And every single one of them had every form of shall we call it, entity coming out of them. Animal entities where they looked exactly like cats and panthers. Remember that? Snakes coming out of people. Other type of entities coming out of people. It was just absolutely a zoo. And all I could do as the instructor, I just sat back and shook my head, because these things just kept coming out and coming out and coming out. And I was wondering, when is there going to be an end to it? And the end was after they had to re-experience, to some degree, the burning that they had gone through. And then that phase of our seminar, which was quite extensive for a few days, that came to an end. Doug, do you want to say something on that?
One of the things that I've seen in that instance where there were a number of that was my second year out in Maui and my second visualization and consciousness course that I was taking, and so there were a number of those people that did the fire walk at that time that I was already very familiar with, because I'd been working with them for a year, and I'd been in courses with them, and so I had a pretty good understanding of what these people were. Well, let's put it this way: I had a pretty good idea of what the before and after effects were on these folks. And I remember one woman in particular during the instructor's courses prior to when she did the fire walk. I remember looking at her in her eyes, and being very struck by the fact that she had an extremely light scurf rim. Very, very, very light scurf rim, which we'll get into next week in the iridology. But she was maybe up around a level 5, level 4 even, just incredibly, one of the lightest scurf. This is back when you still had a lot of black scurf rims. This is back about 1987. And it was so...
Quite a spiritual lady.
Very, very much so. And I remember at the time, because I was still in my very much well, I still am, I guess, but I was very much still in the process of learning iridology then. And I remember being so struck by the lightness of the scurf rim that I actually asked John to come over and look at it, and just from his experience, just sort of tell me what level, fiber level he thought it was. And he said it was maybe up around a level 5 or so. It was much lighter than I was used to seeing. That same individual did the firewalk, and the scurf rim was black. The scurf rim was black in the eye. It had gone all the way down to level 7 to the level of unconsciousness. And I looked at it just a few weeks before the firewalk, and I saw it afterwards, and it was a dark black scurf rim and quite thick as well.
And for that time onward, body electronics for her did not work because she couldn't get in touch with the mental body.
Another individual who had taken the visualization and consciousness course, matter of fact, several times previously, and I had worked with this individual in a lot of the exercises. We'd been, partners, and I could see a tremendous change in her after going through the firewalk, where she couldn't do things that she had done quite readily the year before. She couldn't get into the mental body. She couldn't control her body and hold it still. And one of the things that I've noticed in a lot of the people that have gone through the firewalk is that it's a much greater challenge for them to discipline themselves. It seems to be a real added challenge to be able to hold the body still and go through the emotions. There seems to be a greater tendency to move around and to wallow in the emotions and not get through it.
But when they do, what happens, Doug?
Well, the thing to realize with respect to the firewalk here is that, I suppose if you go back genetically, probably at some point or another, all of us have done it, back in our genetics. But the thing to realize is there's always going to be certain people out there that are going to say to John or I, well, you don't know what you're talking about because you've never firewalked. There's always going to be people that are going to take that position. John's response will be, well, I haven't jumped off a cliff either, but I can tell you that wouldn't be real good for you. But the thing to realize is that people that have gone through the firewalk and then have been able to overcome it through body electronics, these are the people that are actually going to be the single most effective teachers in this area, because they're going to be able to speak from their own experience. So I'm not encouraging anybody to go out and firewalk now so they can teach about it, but I'm just saying those of you that have already had the experience, you can't change what's happened. You've done it, So let's look upon this from this point onward as a positive, in the sense that if you work very, very diligently and overcome the effects of the firewalk, you're going to be in a very unique position to teach other people about the firewalk, a position that neither John and I is really going to be in many people's eyes. Because I can tell you at a lot of seminars that I've been in with John, this has often been a pretty contentious issue here. There's been a lot of people that will stand right up to John and tell him they don't believe a single thing he's saying here, and that he's dead wrong and absolutely doesn't know what he's talking about in this area. And for those people, if you have somebody who can stand up and say, hey, look, I've done it, I've firewalked and I've gone back through the burning and freed myself, that's going to be a little hard to argue with.
Okay, we've gone through the various ways whereby holes in the auric field can be caused. We've gone through the pains that have been suppressed. We have gone through the firewalk, which is probably one of the greatest suppressors of pain that a person can ever go through. And when the person is able to reverse that and go through that and undo it, it'll be to their decided advantage. You'll have people who have had drugs of different kinds, all kinds of drugs. These destroy and create conditions in the body where the holes in the aura are formed and then must be filled by some sort of an energy pattern. All of these things we must consider. Now, any type of shamanic or demonic thing which renders a person unconscious through the use of drugs These things also cause many holes in the auric field. Donna, don't run away. Come back, please. Okay. Now, all of these things we've discussed now, I think we've covered them all, but anything which renders a person unconscious in any form, either through hypnotism, through any form of shamanic type activity, these things we have to look at very carefully. Now we've got a number of people with questions. Now we got the lineup.
I've heard a couple of conflicting things about when the entity actually leaves the body during point holding or however it comes about. There's going to be a tear in the auric field. Now, does this just heal itself? Is this something that takes place naturally? Or I've heard that sometimes it can happen in a couple of minutes, and at other times it can take up to 7 days, and that there are actually people out there that can do this for another person, can heal their auric field, or, you know, do we just take it for granted that it happens, or is there actually more to it than that?
There's no question that some people have what we call the gift of healing. All right? No question about that whatsoever. But bottom line, the instructions that I have received is that the most effective is when the person is able to overcome the pain, emotional pain, physical pain, whatnot, the traumas to their body, re-experiencing those on the conscious level, then the hole in the aura is permanently filled. Now you have some people that go around here and manipulate, as we had mentioned before, energy manipulation from the outside in. I want to complete one thought here at this point of time. This girl at the age of 29 had this huge cancerous mass on the side of her neck. Dr. Charles Whitehouse brought her in, and using radionics and color therapy, this, after a while she's sitting in a chair in the middle of the room, no point holding, just radionics and color therapy, after a while he was able to change the energy field of the body and temporarily fill up the hole in the auric field. Okay? This can be done by outside manipulation of energy. Some people have that talent and ability. We can't deny that. Okay? Now, when that is done, at this time, this old gentleman with the black hat and the black coat visibly rose right out of the body of the girl and was readily seen by all involved, told his story, understood the circumstances then and there, and left. The girl with this huge mass on the side of her neck, in 3 days that was totally gone. Are you hearing me? 3 days. This huge mass in the neck went into remission. Okay? Now that was a cancer. How about other cancers? Now my teachers have told me, and I'll tell you one thing, I don't necessarily believe it 100%. But here's what I have been told. All illness is entity related. All illness is entity related. And this is that person's experience. Now, more and more I'm starting to take that position. But I still believe there are certain things, like chemicals that affect the body, pollutions that affect the body, mercury amalgam fillings that affect the body, and fluoride and so on that affect the body, drugs that affect the body. But what I was told, point blank, was that all of these things weaken the body so that holes in the aura are created, and then entities enter in, and then these entities oftentimes bring these various disease packages with them, and then we're hung with it. Now, I'm not going to say all disease is entity related, but men I have had great respect for have made assurance to me that that is true.
Just one last thing on your question, Simone. Think of it this way. The hole in the aura, the aura just like the physical body is an outer manifestation of consciousness. So the thing to realize is the hole in the aura didn't cause itself. It's caused by resistance at the mental level, by resistance and judgment. So certainly someone can command an entity to leave, and just as surely someone can maybe externally manipulate the hole in the aura shut. But if the underlying cause, because the hole in the aura is still just an effect, if the underlying cause, which is the resistance of that individual, is not changed in some way by that individual, because nobody else can change it for them, then it's simply a matter of time before that hole in the aura opens back up again. Conversely, if you go through things in a point holding session, there are many, many situations in a point holding session where the person overcomes the resistance, the hole in the aura closes up, and even though nobody was aware of an entity, all of a sudden we get a big cold wind because there's no place for the entity anymore. A lot of times, most of the time when the entity is released, there's a very obvious cold wind. Sometimes it can be felt by people 15, 20 feet away. Sometimes it's only felt fairly close to the person. But generally speaking, when there's an entity release, you're going to get quite an obvious cold wind that emanates from a person. A lot of times, without anybody having any awareness of there being an entity there in the first place, during a point holding session, somebody will go back through something and overcome a certain resistance, and by releasing that resistance, the hole in the aura shuts up. There's no place for the entity to be anymore, so it has no choice but to leave because its home is gone. It's been evicted. And at that point, it's quite common. How many of you just in point holding sessions have all of a sudden felt cold winds and coldness around you? Well, that's it. So the thing about it is a lot of those entities, they haven't been sent to the light of God. They're just hanging around somewhere, which is why you need to do a little bit of cleanup work every now and again, like say at the end of the day at the seminar, just to make sure there's no stragglers.
Yeah, that's actually what I was asking, that when the entity comes out, if it's, through the repressed emotion coming out and the entity goes with that, is it assumed that with that the aura will basically heal up straight away when that's gone, if that's the case? Yeah?
Unless there are multiple entities where you have a real good shredded aura. And that might take a little while. So oftentimes you'll have a cold wind, and then you'll have another cold wind, and then for the next 20 minutes you have everything is freezing around you, like with icicles. And we've seen the frosts on people, and that literally frost on a person when their body goes through this extreme endothermic reaction. Now, here's where you have tremendous releases of these things.
Mag had something, I think.
I just want to say that let us not underestimate the potential entity involvement within each of us, because if you consider all of these things that they've just suggested that leave holes in our aura, and the fact that if we have any resistance in our body, we have a hole in the aura, and the fact that most of us are, if we're lucky, at level 6, which means we're just a little bit above unconsciousness, then we all have holes in our aura. And from my own personal experience, I still get on the table to this day and have 2 or 3 cold winds that are released, because each time I'm on the table, I don't necessarily totally get to the mental level on the area of resistance that I'm working on. Sometimes we gain awareness of something and we're able to see a picture that we haven't seen before, we get a memory, but we're not necessarily completing that fully on the mental level, which we'll get more into later, I'm sure. And so the hole is still there. The entity may have left and been sent to the light, but the aura still has a hole in it, and so it's just going to be filled up by something else.
Thank you, Maggie. Here's something that you need to put down in your notes, bottom line. Lots of times when we get in a hurry and we want to get all the entities out, we get a little bit overzealous, and we get a little bit over, shall we say, over anxious. I'll even use that word. And we're there decreeing like crazy to exercise the entities. A few people have made the statement, no, don't be afraid of these things. There's nothing to worry about. Clean up the mess afterwards, so to speak, when they're still hanging around, which we haven't done. And Lil's suggestion here that we ought to do that is a very good suggestion. We haven't done that yet. But you don't notice that I'm in a big hurry to do that, do you? Okay, before lunch we'll do that. We'll get there. But we have to understand that even when we're holding points on somebody and they're into some definite gyrations where there's a lot of activity around the solar plexus and there's things hopping around, things are moving back and forth and all sorts of things, don't get your tail in a knot and make it where you have to get that entity out now. That entity may not be out for 6 months. Okay? But there may be a whole flock of them in there. And by giving one command, you might get rid of a quarter of them to start with. And all these cold winds come marching out, and sometimes you have a few hisses and screams and verbal patterns that are amazing. When those things come marching out, then you've got your hand on the right principle, but you may not have the aura closed. You may not have re-experienced on the mental level all of the factors involved to bring the memory out to release the entity or to close the aura fully, which then allows the entity to be released. So as much as you want to dance around and get all excited and chant and do your decrees and all that, oftentimes it's to no avail. So just don't do all these things in vain, just be patient, wait for a while, and then when you have that inner knowledge through prayer, now is the time. You go in with the big stick at that time, and then when you give that command, you know that you have the support of the heavens with you. And when you have that support of the heavens, that entity will then be released and sent to the light of God. But don't get all excited ahead of time, please. And don't be premature in these things. You have some people shouting over and over again, to release the entity. All you need to do it is one time with confidence and with proper timing, and you got the job done. Okay, you don't have to do it a whole lot of times. We'll get into that before the morning's over.
Could you comment on the Native American peyote ritual with the sweat lodge and all that?
Sure. Peyote, like any of the drugs, the peyote itself is going to leave gaping holes in the aura. And actually, if you look at sweat lodges, saunas, and things of this nature, even just from a straight iridology point of view, it's quite obvious that they lead to a darker, thicker scurf rim. So the sweat lodge itself is possibly a good source of entity involvement and holes in the aura. But certainly,
if it's too hot.
If it's too hot. But what you want to do, because if you're looking at an increase in unconsciousness in the body, what you're going to see is the scurf rim in the eye getting thicker and darker. And you'll see a lot of people, for example, a lot of people with a Scandinavian heritage where they've been, many, many generations of the saunas. You'll often find these people with bright blue eyes, but if you look around the outside, you'll see a very, very thick, dark scurf rim because you've got on a genetic level many, many, many centuries of going through very, very hot, extremely hot saunas. And this has led to a lot of unconsciousness in the body.
There's nothing wrong with a low-temperature sauna. But you get into a high-temperature sauna, and you have your two-edged sword here, okay? Well, if you're up around 180 degrees, you're too hot. And probably 140 is getting up there pretty hot, really, if you want to look at it carefully. Fahrenheit. If you're down around 109 degrees Fahrenheit, for 15 minutes, you might be able to handle that very effectively. And you might say, well, that's not really a sauna. That's just like a warm bath. And that's true. Anything above and beyond that could be destructive to the body if you look at it overall. And you check the iris of the eye on people that have done it continually, and you will not be disappointed. You'll see the fibers push clear back toward the pigment layer.
I mean, you figure at 110 Fahrenheit, you're wiping out the lysine and the tryptophan. You get up a bit higher than that, you're killing enzymes. So, it's pretty obvious there's an effect on the body there. Sorry.
Let's go back to your question, Matthew, if I may. Let's go back to the sweat lodges. How many of you are aware that there are tremendous, I'll use the word phenomena, that take place in sweat lodges? How many of you are aware that sometimes the people in charge can actually turn into an animal? Okay, that's the height, that's the very height of possession. Now, they call it spirituality. Nonsense. Don't be deceived by it. People have put themselves to where their holes are wide, wide open, and there's other people that are perfectly willing to hop in there, take over their bodies, and turn them into an animal, or turn them into something or somebody else, which they do turn into somebody else in some occasions, okay? And this person gives a beautiful discourses on this. All of this is holes in the auric field filled from those in the astral realm, and you can rest well assured that the ascended masters have nothing to do with this. But this weakens the structure of the auric field for the person and leaves them susceptible to the invasions of entities from the astral realm. And they'll have all kinds of voices speaking to them. You'll have all kinds of wonderful channeling and all this garbage going through them. And all of this sort of thing is from the astral realm. It is not from God. It is a phenomena, and we have to label it as such. Now, I believe, Matthew, does that answer your question, sir? Okay.
You didn't say anything about the Ouija board.
Very good question. If you sit and call upon the spirits to take over your body, for example, in automatic writing, and you leave your hand perfectly still, after a while your hand starts to jiggle and move, and it'll give you all of the messages that you want. You have some spirit taking over your body, and you have all the most beautiful automatic writing that you could want to look at. 90% of it may be true. But if you believe that 10% of a lie, they've got you, and you're hooked, and you're down the tube, and you're led down the primrose path. All right? Don't give over your power to somebody who uses you from the astral realm. They're trapped in the astral realm. They didn't make the grade. The information they give you isn't any better than what they were able to handle when they're here on the earth. Okay, so watch out for that type of automatic writing. That doesn't come from God. That comes again from the astral realm. Do you get beautiful teachings? Sure. Do they water your eyes and warm your heart occasionally? Sure. No question about that. But let's take a look at where they come from. They come from those that haven't made the grade yet. Why didn't they make the grade? Because there's something they didn't understand. And they'll give you that same lack of understanding if you allow yourself to be led down the primrose path by them. Now, we've talked about automatic writing. Your question was on the Ouija board. Many people also will leave themselves open to the Ouija board. We've had people where the tables float in the air, and they have all these seance type things that come about, and the hand moves and gives all kinds of answers. Now, sometimes you have friendly little imps taking the person over to move their arms and hands, and you get accurate answers, and you put confidence in this. But after a while, if you have a destructive spirit that's a real troublemaker, and some of them are, not all of them by any means, but some of them are, they'll jump in there and they'll give you a whole lot of instructions that if you follow those instructions, you'll kill yourself. And you have that cropping up in the newspapers every so often about these kids playing with Ouija boards that end up in their death. Now, you be very careful about all these things. Leave the Ouija boards alone. Learn to trust your own intuition. And jiggle the people in front of you if they fall asleep, would you please? Okay, very, very good. Thank you very much. Elizabeth, are you back with a living? Okay, next time, apples. Okay. A Ouija board is a little game that you pick up in any toy store where they have little numbers and the letters on it and a pointer. And your hand will start moving automatically as the spirit from the astral realm takes over, because a godly spirit will not take over another human body. It'll influence through the Spirit of God, but not through the Ouija board. This comes from the astral realm.
So just to clarify, then anytime a spirit comes in, is that you are opening up your auric field? Is that what you're saying? Is it so? Does a Ouija board put holes in your auric field? That was kind of the question.
Definitely, for the record, that if you play with the Ouija board and leave yourself open for another spirit to control and direct your body, you're causing holes by invitation to form in your auric field. And you leave yourself wide open to what some people will call demonic possession.
There's a gentleman in Australia called Ian White who deals with Australian bush flowers, and he claims that the fringed violet can heal auric fields. Do you want to comment on that, please?
I don't know a thing about it.
I've got another question. I'm from Denmark, where witchcraft burning was practiced right up until 1905, and I'm wondering whether the burning through a karmic connection can hinder your progression in healing, and also whether that'll affect your numbness and the level of consciousness.
Burning the witches, you mean?
Yeah. Whether, yeah.
So you're saying if genetically or on a soul level that an individual was themselves burned as a witch, whether that would have an impact?
Yes.
Most likely. It'd certainly be a lot more pain than most would lovingly and willingly endure.
Oh, I had a very interesting experience with a... Okay. I've had a... Yeah. I had a very interesting experience with a person who I did a bit of point holding with in the last few months, which pertains to this lecture today. There was one occasion where an entity came up, and that was a very long session. This particular person was attached to having that entity there. It had become his friend. It had helped him through his life and avert various disasters. And it had gone into his body when he was 5 years old, and it was an Australian Aboriginal person from way back in early Australian history who had had a very happy life and was a very, very nice person. He'd been loved and had a good life, and he was shot in the back by the Bluecoats, which we know in Australian history, in Captain Cook's time, they wore blue coats. So it was a very interesting session, and at one stage, I had to keep reminding my friend that for his own health, it was a good idea if he chose to release this entity, because he'd had a lot of digestive problems in this area his whole life, and he'd had a feeling which he identified as a type of anxiety since that entity had entered his body. And so it took a very long time before he did realise that he had to allow it to go. But during that time, the entity itself went into healing crisis, and he said the entity's in healing crisis. And through this person, we learned about Australian Aboriginal culture. He was relating Australian Aboriginal culture and the way his life had been, and how he'd had such a wonderful life, and they all lived together in the tribe, and they all loved each other, and they didn't have any problems at all. And so the entity went through. Or we said, well, let's help him go through this then. And explain the body electronics and what he's going through, and he has to love the pain of being shot in the back, and the shock of when he was pushed out of his last body. And he went through all of that, and then he thanked us. He was thanking us, explained to him that he's actually trapped in the host's body. He's not free, and to have his own life and have a fulfilling life. He actually has to leave and go on. And he understood that, and he was thanking us, and he gave a message. He said, what you're doing can help many, many people, and never stop doing it. And we thought that was really quite a nice experience.
I think you're next. No, I just gave him a seat here. You're next.
Had to write my question down because there's so much else going on. It goes back to about all illness being entity related, and I know that you said you weren't totally convinced about that. And the work that I've been involved with in the last few months, although I've been working in these areas for about 12 years, was with entity involvement, which we could sense and feel, and another could see in the at the fourth dimensional level in the etheric body around the body. And we had the father and then a mother and then some children in the same family coming to see us, and not just one family, another family as well. And they had a kind of very large entity in the aura which was affecting the whole family, and it was like, I guess, what you talk about with the genetic and inherited type of thing. And these energies, life forms, were all treated with great love and respect, and on different occasions they left, and there was a lot of love and a lot of light in the room that we use for our healing, and it made a tremendous difference to the family. They were all had a change of energy, and they also noticed over 2 or 3 days that the space that you talk about that's left is, they had to have that time to adjust to it. But what I was going to say was that this is a self-created thing. It's something that we attract. Do you agree with that? It's something that we attract into our lives.
I can't disagree with that.
Well, the other interesting thing that because it was, I saw a book where a lady was clairvoyant and had drawn beautiful paintings. In the etheric body, the things that we have not dealt with show up as sticky, tarry, a bit like the stuff I passed on one occasion. Looked pretty revolting. And the person who could see it said that it looks pretty yucky, and we could feel the stuff. And wherever we feel a bit sore, a bit achy, or one particular person had a really bad heart, he was a potential heart attack person. This stuff was bound all around that area in his etheric body, and it was not yet affecting him.
Now don't run away. I want everything come out that you have in your mind, all right? But let's go back for this black sticky stuff. When you reach a point in your own progression, you will take a look at the individual, and you will see the energy patterns around the body, and there's no question about this. You will see black patterns of energy around certain areas where there's specific blockages in the body. You'll see little spirals of energy coming right out of acupuncture points. Okay, acupuncture points are all valid. Acupuncture is a valid science of balancing up the body parts. And these little black spirals go after you have balanced up the body. But because it's a balancing technique, after a while, the little black spiral will appear again where there's an out of balance situation. Now that out of balance situation is, that black spiral is equivalent to this black icky junk. Now how many have you, after point holding, you got this sticky stuff all over you and you have to go home and take a shower and just this icky goo all over your body? This is that stuff coming out of the astral realm, the energy field around your body, so to speak, which some people will call ectoplasm. And the people can see it. It is this black, icky stuff. And it's all over our bodies. And we need to wash our bodies and get that energy off of our bodies. And we need to wash our bodies well sometimes after point holding sessions, because it's just like, well, where this icky junk come all over our system, we can feel it. It's just, you know, especially after when there's been a whole lot of entity releases and that sort of thing. So, Jan, you're right on. Okay, can you continue on, please? But I want to back up what you're saying.
The other interesting thing was that we moved from actually having our hands in this stuff and moving it out to just being perfectly still and totally asking for the masters who were working with us, who were also seen in the room in fourth dimension. I haven't had the privilege of seeing one in the flesh yet. There was a transmutation of the stuff was just disappearing. Not all of it. It was like the people that came to see us had already been doing a lot of work, and it was almost like, well, how I felt about it was that by the grace of God, there was some healing going on. That I can give you an example of a lady in Cairns, a young lady who was very badly abused, and she had the most awful mouth. She had like a pyorrhea gums. They were red, inflamed. She was really embarrassed about her mouth, and teeth looked reasonably healthy. When she came to see us on about the third or fourth occasion, I forgot to tell you that we'd been doing some breathing with this, which involves a very physical release. She released some stuff in her mouth, or she released the entity that was formed around the past abuse, and shortly after that her mouth was healed. Her mouth was totally clear, and she'd had it for years.
Let's look at something here for a minute, Jan. One of the instructions that has been given to me, which I'm giving to you now, do not lay your hands suddenly on anybody. Okay. Even in point holding, if you feel not to hold points on that person, don't, because there's a reason for it. Go by your intuition. Be prayerful. Every step you take, every step every day. Do all that you can to be prayerful, and you'll know exactly what to do, and then you'll know what not to do. You will find that many people who are into body work die young. They age rapidly and they die young because they have not been able to mentally, on the mental level, re-experience the things that are occurring on the physical level. And so they go, and by the body work that they do, whether it's massage work or deep tissue massage or what have you, or body electronics that's not completed on both ends, or on any type of auric cleansing programs that you understand, Jan. Okay, all of these things here, the person must realize that they take on the energy of the person that they're dealing with, and unless that energy is totally transmuted, then that becomes part of their energy field, and downscale, involutionary they go. And many of the people get cancer who are massage therapists, who are in body work. They get cancer and they die young. This is something I want you all to consider carefully.
What I understand, and I'm checking this, is the more we can be in that loving, unconditional space, the less problems we will have with this involvement of entity.
Show me one person that has mastered unconditional love. Show me one person. And I'll show you a person that isn't here anymore. All right? All of the rest of us have not yet learned to master unconditional love. So we try to assume the virtue if we haven't not. That's a correct principle. But in the meantime, in those areas that we don't have unconditional love, and we still have resistances, those will be magnified then in our own body. Now, Jan, I'm not. We're just going through countering back and forth here with thoughts, but these things need to be brought out for all of our awareness. There's none of us with yet where we've attained that unconditional love, because things get like a burr under the saddle. It happens occasionally.
Where I live in Yungaburra, there's a big old house, and it's Yungaburra is the place of spirits or haunted. I think someone said to me haunted spirits, and I think spirits is enough just to say. And but in our experience, when people are coming and in to see us, they usually leave 2 or 3 mates behind, and this has been really interesting. And sometimes even someone that I know who I wouldn't expect to have too many things hanging around comes in and leaves a few behind too. So we sit down, or whoever thinks about it, at least 2 or 3 times a week, and sometimes more. And I've got a 3.5-year-old granddaughter who's a little magnet to a lot of things, and we can tell by her behaviour that she's picked up whatever's been happening, because she's around the table when healing is going on, and she's being brought up with things that are happening in the house. And so we sit down and ask for them to be surrounded by the Christ light. And it was pointed out or suggested to me by somebody recently that all these things that we are expecting to happen soon, there will be a great deal of overcrowding on the astral plane, and that we are doing them a kindness. I had a certain amount of resistance to being what was called in the earlier days of my group involvement, or healing group involvement, rescue work. And I just accept now that there are people who are confused and wanting to go on.
Anything more, Jan? You got one more little thing there you want to share with everybody?
Well, the only thing that came to mind, that I have a friend here, and we've done a fair amount of debating on this, and I think he's probably really pleased that I'm up here sharing some of it and getting it on tape, and getting John's response. And I can't think, there probably is something else, but I can't think of it at the moment. Thank you.
Sama's next. Sama.
It's a pity I seem to have too many questions. But the first one that really concerns me so much is the act of voodoo. Because I have been thinking a lot since I got involved in body electronics. How will my community in Africa take this new science or anything? Wouldn't they start saying to me, oh, he's going to learn the white man's juju to come and say ours is not working? But I said, anyway, I'll still try and do it, because that's what my heart is calling me to. Now, as I've been trying now to learn about voodoo, I realized that in the team there are people who are working for the negatives, and there are also other people who are in the same community working to counteract it. Now, how do you actually identify somebody in a community who is working to counteract these negative forces? Because they are the type of people I would really encourage people to work with, who know that this is where we belong, and negative, positive, but we are working for the positive to make sure that all those negative things are neutralized. I will do it to help the community. And I know I had written down animal transformation, but it came up when you were talking about the sun. Is it sweat lodges? Okay. Now, in some of the areas in Cameroon, from the story I know, is that when the community used to be in trouble, for example, if there was flooding and they needed like an elephant to be able to transport things, it was very easy for somebody to just transform into an elephant and then do the things they want to do, and then they have what...
Please repeat that again, sir. I want everyone to hear this.
Now, if they wanted to do something, and for example, if there was flooding and they needed to move things from one area to another, it meant that they needed an animal probably like an elephant, which will be able to walk in the river and go across. Then somebody within that community can just immediately transform into an elephant and then be of service to that community. In that situation, I don't really see that as a negative thing. On the other hand, you also have people in that very community who had that power to transform into an elephant. But what they do is they go around and look at the most beautiful farms with good food and everything. And then at night they transform into elephants and go and make sure that they destroy all the crops. So it becomes very difficult to balance things up. So the question I'm asking now, do you just blankly say that any act of animal transformation is an involutionary act, or are there times when it's actually useful to the community?
I was just trying to think of what animal I could turn into and just kind of fly on out there. I've never thought about that before, Sama.
Go upstairs.
I think that we all have a tendency to focus on the outer a lot, because this is where our attention tends to be fixated. And so we often tend to look at the actual action itself and perhaps not as keenly at the motivation that would be beneath that action. There will be perhaps a time and place and purpose for all things under the heavens. And yet, even when a particular action, we may break a lower law in order to be of service to a higher law. However, there is still, we still have to, shall we say, experience the consequences of the broken lower law. So on some level or another, those people are obeying a higher law in some regard to be of service, but on another level there still are some lower laws where they're tying themselves in with sorcery type practices, and there will be consequences. The individual there themselves has to decide whether the consequences of the broken lower law is shall we say, a sacrifice they're willing to make in order to serve a higher purpose. Some individuals will be able or willing to make that sacrifice, and perhaps in that instance it may well be appropriate for them to do that. But it would be a very narrow razor's edge there, where there would be tremendous temptation on the part of an individual to engage in some activity where it would not be appropriate. And there would be a lot of opportunity there for the individual to get trapped and stuck into that lower involutionary pathway.
What's the motivation involved? What is the motivation? Is it to bring forth a constructive activity? And then because of the cultural upbringing, we use what is available at that time to the best of our knowledge to bring about a purpose of service and help. So the motivation of the spirit involved, the motivation of the individual, is what we need to look at. Now, the lower law has been broken. If the lower law continually is broken, then the person becomes subject to the consequences of the broken lower law and actually goes into the involutionary spiral, because they have given themselves over to a power which empowers them to become the elephant. The person does not have that power themselves, but usually through the help of the spirit world, the astral realm that they have made through some rites of passage. They are able to penetrate that astral realm and then bring in the transformation of their body into the elephant. There's no question that this exists. The thing is eventually we reach the point where we have the faith of Job, so to speak, in the olden days, where when we make a decree for this, for help from the ascended masters, we get help directly and immediately from that realm, rather than depending upon the old ways which are now being slowly discarded throughout the earth, of entering into the realm of the astral realm for power to bring about this in and of ourselves, which is not, it is not the godly path. It is the spiritual astral path.
Thank you. Now, I have another question here.
Excuse me, one more thing. Oftentimes we think the means justify the ends. Therefore, as long as the end result is good, then whatever we've done is justifiable. That's not necessarily true if you look at it in the long haul.
Now, I was also wondering about ecstasy. Some days ago, you said that you will exclude somebody who've been taking marijuana until he's been able to stay away from it for at least 6 months before he can join the BA class. Will you take the same position with somebody who's been taking ecstasy?
In this day and age, because of the number of amounts of misinformation, we oftentimes do the best we can. People who are taking ecstasy oftentimes are taking marijuana also. Some of them don't take marijuana, but a handful are still taking ecstasy. If they're taking ecstasy, get off the ecstasy. This is the advice that we will give the people who are our students. But this is wherein, after the 3 weekend classes, that should qualify a person for coming to this class. They are already on point holding, they're already on the program, they're already off of the ecstasy, they're already on off of the marijuana, they're off of the heroin, and so on. And we've had all of these in our classes. Okay, when that's over and done with, and they're off that ecstasy and other things, that should have taken place long before they come here. But there are times when we have people slip through the net, so to speak. Yeah. And present company accepted. But they slip through the net a little bit. And then what do you do after a person's already here doing the best they can and their sincerity of their heart is not to be questioned? You do the best you can. You teach people correct principles. You let them govern themselves. After a while, they're off of the cigarettes. After a while, they're off of the coffee. After a while, they're off of the marijuana and other things and more disastrous things, and even the medications, which in sometimes is more disastrous than the marijuana itself.
Thank you. There is another saying in Africa that if you are the target and they can't get you, they'll try and hit your dog or whatever. And an involvement in the work at the moment, sometimes when I look at my environment and think of my kids and even my wife, I get concerned. But it's like I keep saying, if you work for service, you have to do it. What advice do you give me?
The path for truth is oftentimes one-pointed, and you do the best you can. You sacrifice sometimes your kids. You sacrifice your families. You sacrifice your jobs. You sacrifice your good name, if there's any good name left, after the churches get through butchering you up and so on and casting you out. And these are real things. You have people who have taken a stand for body electronics, and the churches have just castigated them, because what happens when you give people their freedom? No tithing. And the ministers get very upset. Now, I believe firmly in supporting the churches because it is helpful. It is like a cohesive force in each community to hold people together. And churches are wonderful if they're run properly. But when you have tyrannical leadership, usurping the free agency of man, then you've got a terrible thing there that has to be dealt with, and you just simply do what you have to do, and you take your chances and pay your nickel, so to speak, take your chances, and that's it. This is where we all are. I mean, after a while, that trial passes. Confucius said one time, "This too shall pass," and it has a lot of interesting meanings if you're good at punning. But this too shall pass. Everything that we go through in the way of our various, shall I use the word, the constipations of life. So Sama, don't let it worry you, because everything is as it should be. But don't compromise principles, ever. You stand on principles and you don't deviate from principles, and you take the consequences of your action, which can be the sacrifice of your life, your health, your wife, whatever.
Thank you very much. Now, finally, I'd like to share an experience I had on Sunday night, because I never understood it. It's just today that I've understood that experience. Now, when I got into my room on Sunday night, just about 10 minutes after I went to bed, I thought the room was invaded. But strangely enough, just by the end of my bed, where my leg was, I was sleeping on the lower ground. There was a creature, like a black man, not taller than the height of the second bed, who was actually trying to start a fight with me. And I looked at the animal and I just laughed, and then looked at it again, and then it disappeared. And I just thought that this is one of my normal experiences I've been going through, with voodoo reactions and things like that. I didn't realize that it might have actually been what we're calling a UFO.
UFO, was it like a reptile or an animal?
It looked more like... Sorry, I was actually confused whether it was a human being, but it's the height that's actually brought the whole point very clearly. It wasn't taller than the second bed, and it was expanded, flat, not in its flat form, but quite active. But sorry, since then I've never had any bad dreams in the room anyway, so you don't have to be afraid.
Okay. Doug?
What I'd like to talk about are some things a little bit more the norm. I believe all these things we've been talking about do exist. Like, I've been to almost every country in Africa and the Cameroons, where Summer comes from, and I know that what he's talking about does happen. But what I want to talk about is something that I believe affects all of us, and it's how this hole in the auric field can open up. Now, John's talked about some ways, like drugs and alcohol and medications and things, how that auric field opens up. But in my opinion, it can also open up if through some emotional states, like through attachments or resistances, we open up that auric field and let an influence or a confused soul come in and manipulate us. Now, this can happen say I get a little bit competitive and I want to win at all costs. Well, I'm putting out an energy at that point, a vibration, and then confused souls who are also on that vibration will move in on me, and also, all of a sudden I'm super competitive. And the reason I'm mentioning this is this is how souls can move in, but what's more important, how do we move them out or make it so that they cannot move in on us? Now, how I know this is I've talked to thousands of these souls. Now, I don't give any credence to what all of them say. I don't believe it. But when you talk to thousands of them, you can take sort of an average, okay? And because I know it's not coming from God, I know they are confused, all right? And this has been in groups all around the world that I've done this. Okay, so what they've told me is that things like electric shock, as Doug calls it, therapy, in inverted commas, in mental hospitals where someone is confused, they're possessed by maybe multiple souls, and they'll put these electrodes on the patient and zap, and the confused souls will not stay in that body when that happens. But they don't go very far, right? And they get so smart, they tell me this, that when they see the doctor coming with those electrodes, they'll move out before the electric shock comes about, and then as soon as the electric shock's finished, they'll move back in again. Okay? Now, this is... Yeah, the entities move out of the body, and then they'll move back in again once the electrodes are gone. Now, they're pretty smart. Now, this can... In our body electronics experience, we've had the experience where these souls will move out. You'll feel the cold air, and that experience is like that. Now, if this is not also accompanied by a change in consciousness... Wait a minute. Okay, if it's not accompanied by a change in consciousness, then another entity, or that same entity, can move right back in again into that void that was created, because we need to fill that void with a change in consciousness. And so this is why... look, Maggie was saying this before. I'm just backing up what she was saying. That as we move up through the levels, less and less we will attract those souls. But don't think that just by having your aura closed up by a practitioner or body electronics work that's not going to come back again. The moment you open up your auric field by any sorts of feelings like of glory trips or being overly proud, look, there's a lot of overly proud souls out there, and this is where a lot of their channeling comes through. They're so proud that they're too proud to admit that they're confused, and so they'll come in and they'll say that they're St. Germain, or they'll say that they're someone else, and they'll say all this sort of baloney, and when it's not true. That's just a confused soul. As John said, 90% of it may be spot on. But they're just somewhere they'll have one dinky little attachment or one dinky little resistance that's holding them back. And so the main thing that I want to say is that, they're not a big deal. When I say if we're relaxed, they can't find us, I mean that's just like speeding up our energy, just doing techniques that we know, just that we're not pulling in a confused vibration. It's because we're just like little radio transmitters, and as soon as we put out that vibration, wow, we appear on their radar screen and zap, in they come, But when we're relaxed, it's like, if say I'm relaxed, they say, where did Peter go? And it's like, he went that way. And they can't find me. Okay, thanks.
I'm not sure how to ask this question, but I've been sitting there before trying to set something in my mind. If we've experienced a lot of life in this whatever we're in, and if we have a massive amount of entity involvement in us, which we obviously do since we're all sick, if each one of those entities has an emotion, thoughts, feelings, and everything else with it, then I don't even know if this can be answered. Who are we? What are we? And what the hell are we doing? Or how do we know?
You just answered your own question, sir. This is the confusion, I think, when we become aware, we know how complicated things then are.
Just to go back over what John covered an hour or so ago, we're an immortal intelligence that has had certain experiences, and we have carried along with us a tremendous amount of resistance on a soul level, which we call the natural man. That clouds our awareness quite a bit in and of itself. We then come into a particular physical vehicle, which has all of its own, on a genetic level, all of its own resistance patterns down through the eons of time, and we'll call that the constitutional man, which further clouds our mind. The eons of time, that further clouds our mind. Yeah. And then superimpose along with those two is you have all the entity involvement. So bottom line, in answer to your question, who we are is very confused because we have tremendous amounts of resistance from all these different sources, and you start to consider other possibilities. What about bringing entities along on a genetic level? What about entities that one would get from one's own parents, for example? And you start to consider all the different permutations of the above, and yes, we have a lot of stuff to work through here.
Thank you. I now understand what Bill Murray was talking about in Ghostbusters movie a lot better.
Let's look at this for a moment. There's a tremendous amount of misinformation on this worldwide. Each of us are given certain laws through channeling that we can protect ourselves and do this and do that. We can wash our hands and shake our hands and put sage into our, inhale sage, or put sandalwood around us, or burn incense, or kink a little gong, however you want to do it, You have all these things going on. But the teachings of the masters are very clear and very precise. And so in doing a cleansing of a room after point holding, or doing cleansing of any other parts of our areas, like our rooms that we have over here, or wherever we are, I'm going to have Anita in a few minutes prepare herself for a little discourse on that. Thank you very much for all your morning work, by the way. Esther, I think you're next. Doug.
I think Anita might have something.
Well, according to the I Am teachings, the removal of entities is one of the most important things we can do on this planet. And if you continue with those teachings, there are specific decrees and what would be the proper word? Instructions, right? Proper instructions to help you rid yourself of these entities and make it as a daily thing. So we may go into some of the decrees later, but the best thing to do is to get the books and just find out the whole sequence.
I'm going back to Sama's question on voodoo and protecting of the family and so on. Already John has answered most of it. I've been more involved in this than you. You came just recently. But Sama has also had a lot of negative attacks and things like that. Even with him studying in London, I got him involved in body electronics so his consciousness would be raised and all of the restrictions. He's had a very tough time fighting this. And now I realize from his own, from within him, if he had followed all the things that he had gone to, he would have been really of the very dark side. He's come a long way, and I'm really very grateful for that. Most of our voodoo practitioners are practicing from the astral realm. However positive or negative, it is the aim, what they're doing, and it is who approaches them. If you approach them with a lot of money and you ask them to do anything, negative or positive, they do. Like the elephant crossing the water, it is because they also are involved. It is a thing in the village. But most of them of their own won't go out to do that because their masters who are of the astral realm with whom they have made a pact doesn't allow them to do anything. And most of the time before they got those powers, they had to make a promise of sacrificing some of people that you know of. Now about your children, Anita has just answered that. I was just going to say that. What I have personally found out that would protect a lot of things when Gloria was sick in England and all of those was the Ascended Master teachings. And that I have found to be everything that we do need now at home. And what I want to say also to the class is that we have here 4 Africans, and from both the East and the West Coast. When I did my first instructor's course in America with Doc, he told us about the 100th monkey syndrome. And I believe that if we get into it really consciously and do everything, we would have, when we go home to bring this message, there would be people there already waiting for it. Thank you.
Esther, let's look at the United States for a moment, where they have done extensive genealogical research. And they have reported through their own genealogical societies that 93% of the people who live in the United States have black ancestry. Now, there's a lot of point holding going on in the States, and they're probably rattling all of Africa. Okay? And there's a lot of that going on. And so you've got a lot of help there that is not, I mean, things are just ripe. I have already seen what's going to happen in Africa, and it's just going to be a bombshell of activity in body electronics.
I wasn't here this morning, so if you told the story already, stop me. But this thing about the packs that she was talking about, John and I met a Tonga in Rarotonga, and it wasn't the actual Tonga, it was her niece. And she told us that her aunt made a pact with the dark forces that she would be able to heal people. And she did. When people came to her, she did heal them. But she also told her niece that the 11th person who came to her must die. Every 11th person must die. And also, if that 11th person was one of her relatives, like, for instance, it might happen where the relative might come as the 11th, then if she didn't want them to die, then she would have to take an infliction within her own body, like elephantitis or whatever, some disease would come into her own body, and she would become distorted.
She had, her legs were like two gigantic mushrooms on top of mushrooms from the elephantitis. About this size, I'll show you.
Like that. From taking on so many because the relatives would come and she wouldn't want them to die. So these are very powerful things, and they're very real.
Just one quick thing. On the Sama's earlier question about the elephant, changing into an elephant, I think that one of the things to realize, I'll make a statement first. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. And many people with nothing but the best of intentions will fall into the trap of believing that the ends justifies the means. And they will feel that although they may be uncomfortable with what they're doing, they may not really want to get tied in with the sorcery, they'll feel like, well, maybe we can get away with it just this once, and maybe it'll serve a higher purpose. And that's the trap. Because once they got their hooks into you, it's a lot easier. Well, once you've compromised a correct principle once, it becomes much easier for you to do it again. And the more you do it, the easier it gets, and after a while it's a habit, and you can get drawn further and further in. And as your own confusion and darkness of mind accelerates, it will become much, much easier for the dark forces to continually deceive you. And next thing you know it, a few years down the line, you're coming from a perspective 180 degrees opposed to truth, where maybe you started off at the beginning and you're only off by one little degree.
I've just been noticing the tremendous increase of this kind of a oily substance on my skin. Have any of you kind of noticed that suddenly? It's just coming out. It's not sweat. Do you notice that? Now, Jan, you're familiar with that from your work. Do you notice this is just like you're treating somebody and having all this goo coming out. You feel it? How many feel it? May I see a show of hands? Okay, you've got it. Now, this is different than just sitting in a warm room. And we're going to have a wonderful release here in just a few minutes. Jan? Oh, yes. It's coming beautifully. It's just wonderful. Lynn?
I just want to thank you for talking about this, because it's something I don't know a lot about, is this entities and things, and it's really fascinating for me, and I'm really looking forward to Anita talking about cleansing rooms and things like that. But what I came up for You mentioned tithing, and I just don't know if it's the appropriate time to talk about it, but I didn't want to let the opportunity go by, and I'd just like to hear your thoughts on tithing and things like that, because I'm sort of a little bit confused about tithing. Thank you.
Save your question. Put that down, Doug, as the next item, as an item next week or so to discuss. Tom.
It's just sweat. If you want it, you can kill the camera. You don't have to put this on tape. A lot of times when you're really, really serious or you're really scared, you use humor. I'm going to use some humor, and I'm not scared. I don't believe in entities. I don't believe in that stuff. Don't start. How many people here don't believe in this stuff? Okay, good. Well, you're in cell block A. I can't invite you in there. If you don't believe in it, which I don't, come to cell block A tonight, because last night we had a lot of fun. And I don't believe in them. I've never cleansed a room in my life. I relied upon Brooke. I said, Brooke, give me a degree. And Brooke starts taking off on me. I said, no. I said, not that one. That's too long. In my state of mind, I'll never remember it. Give me something short and fast, and let's get this thing over with. But what are you laughing about, Lil? I'm bringing you in on this, too. You started it. For some reason, in cell block A, we've got Lil, got myself, Brendan's back here somewhere, we got him, and I think just about everybody else who's involved with this. Doug wouldn't stay down there last night. No, Brooke, he had his torch and he left. Thanks a lot, you guys. And even Anton here comes running up wide-eyed. Somebody's being killed down there. Get down there now. There's a fire out there in the woods. We think it was the moon. But then him and his two roommates, they go in and lock their door. My roommates and myself could not lock our doors for reasons which might become clear later on. And I have never, ever seen a UFO. I don't believe in that stuff. I've never seen entities. I don't believe in that stuff. I've never met Jesus or anything else. I meditate. I do a lot of energy running and things like that. Well, last night, I wasn't going to tell this, but about 3-something in the morning, I wake up and I go, okay, what is this? I look over toward one of my mates in there, and I saw a profile of, looked like Jesus. I'm getting goosebumps. And I just saw his hair went back like that, the nice little trimmed beard and everything, but I couldn't see the rest of the body. I could see like part of his shoulder here, and I could see it had a little height and depth and width. And I just went, this isn't right. And then it kind of like disappeared. And John said that I saw an entity that was influencing somebody else in the room. Check, please. I'm about ready to get out. But everything went fine like that. When I came in the room after, Jim and John were in there, I said, you guys going down to the room? I got to go pick up my lime up here, and I'll be down a little bit later. I let them go in first, but then they kind of backtracked and didn't go in. And I was hoping that they were going to do the cleansing or something, and I've never done that. But I just walked in. I said, like John Wayne, out. Go to the light now of God. And it sounds, I'm trying to make it kind of humorous just to get through this thing. You guys are all invited to cell block A tonight. I will give up my bed to anybody who would like to sleep there and experience what we went through, and I'm sure privately, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, you're in on it too. You know what's going on. Oh, yeah. You stayed away for a long time too. I was brave. I don't think I need the experience either, but I'm sure as this thing goes along, Doug and Brooke are going to tell you a little bit more. But the telling thing about this was Maggie, who just goes, oh, no, it's only the third day and it's already starting. And I looked and I went, fun and games. So that's humor. Let's just laugh all through this, and nothing's going to happen. We don't believe in this stuff. It's just a little conscious juggling right there. Thank you.
Okay. Now, can you hold your question for a while? We got a time element here to work with. Just hold your questions. We'll get them all answered. I want to have Anita talk to you and talk to you straight and give you specific instructions as what to do. And if you follow these instructions to the letter, nothing is to be worried about. Because when you're tied in directly, now just trust me on this, because I've come up this work the hard way. I came up to this work hard way from atheism, okay? And there's not much darker you can get. And I've come up this work through years and years of working with atheism, and then I figured, well, I've never given prayer a chance. And then when I started praying, I got answers to prayer. And I said, oh, I didn't expect this. And then I realized that I had been missing the boat for so long by putting my trust in the scientific aspect, being, shall we say, born, raised, and trained as a mathematician. No reflection. But the thing is that I could count on mathematics. And I had no visualization or anything like that. I mean, that was just a bunch of poppycock, because I couldn't do it, therefore it didn't exist. And I was very skeptical on a lot of things that were based upon that. And so if I didn't know it for myself, I would not accept it. Now, if I appear a little hard-nosed sometimes, it's because I am. And many people will try to convince me of something, and it might be 15 years before I look at it. I found that to be true. And then all of a sudden I realize, they're absolutely correct. I go back and tell them, hey, what you said was right on. So if I appear a little skeptical, that's because I'm skeptical. If I'm a little slow to understand, I'm a little slow to understand. Forgive me for that. Because I've come up what I consider to be the hard way. I have proved to my knowledge every single step that I've come along. Now, Anita, she comes from the heart, I come from the head. And so Anita has intuitive abilities that I probably in this life will never have. But I'd like her to share specifically the instructions necessary to cleanse this room. And I'm going to put, Anita, you in charge of the whole scenario. Instructions for cleaning our houses, our rooms, our tents, and so on, because... You might want to get the cell blocks, too. Tell Tom what to do. He'll do it. He'll do anything you tell him to right at this point of time. Pardon me?
An entity.
Well, when Anita gets after you, you'll understand.
They're all getting ready to leave. Okay, these things are real, and we believe in them. And but there's a way to release them, because this is one of the most important things we can do. These entities are trapped here in different bodies, and they need to go back to the light of God.
Recycle time.
Yes, recycle time. I know you're all getting ready. I'm talking to the entities now. You're all getting ready to go. You're a little scared, but it's going to be fun. So,
have them feel the cold winds on the feet, or
right.
Like,
is anyone feeling cold right now? Okay. Okay.
That's a little unusual.
You're getting shivery. Okay. I'm feeling it up here too. Very.
Hold your body still, because in some cases, if some of you have an entity within you that's been waiting to get out and release to the light. Some of you need to have that ability to just hold the body still and just feel it go. And it might take a few minutes for it to pack its bags.
Right. So you may feel like an energy leaving from you also, going up that way, or sometimes it comes out of the mouth. Okay? Okay, so now the decree, we use the Ascended Master's names. Now, for me, all Ascended Masters are valid. I can say any of them, and to me, they have potency. If you have a problem with Jesus, if you have a problem with saying the name of Saint Germain or Jesus, which I'm going to use now, you can use another Ascended Master's name.
If you're African, use Meru. You have a big mountain down there and a spiritual center, and Meru is one of the Ascended Masters from that area. Meru. It's in the same within sight of Kilimanjaro.
Okay, you can also use Jesus Christ if you want to. Okay, you can use Kuan Yin, you can use any of the Ascended Masters. But copy this decree down and then we'll do it for the room. In the name of Jesus Christ, Saint Germain, and all the Ascended Masters, I command these entities in so-and-so's body, or room, or house, or whatever, to go directly to the light of God now. Okay. Well, I'm going to give the command now. And you could copy it as I'm saying. In the name of Jesus Christ, Saint Germain, and all the Ascended Masters, I command all entities in people's bodies in this room, in cell block A, in cell block B, in cell block C, on this property, to go directly to the light of God now.
You feel the hair go up on your arms? You feel the cold around your feet? You feel light flickers? Hey? Still there. Just let it go. It takes a few minutes for them to pack their bags. Now, you don't have to say it more than once, because they are under obligation. This is a law of the heavens. And no matter who the entity is, if they're not invited here and don't have a real passport from the heavens, from the hierarchy, and they got no business being here, they have to go. They have absolutely no choice. This is part of the game. And once you understand that, it puts you in control. And it hooks you right directly into the hierarchy, and you have a command that will save your bacon under many circumstances. If you like bacon.
Something I'd like to say, that there's been times where I've been powerless to do anything because of holds that have been put on me. And if that ever happens to you, remember that you can use your mind, and you can use the light. You can use the white light. You can use the violet flame. Your body may be paralyzed, and your speech may be paralyzed. There's been times where I've been trying to call out, and I can't because they put a hold on you. So you can always use your mind. Just don't forget that. You can always use your mind to bring in the light.
That's all it takes. Now, the rest of the time, we're going to find that we're going to have a very peaceful, beautiful place. And if these things do arise, because wherever you have the greatest amount of truth, you'll have the greatest amount of opposition to truth. And they'll come and pester everybody and to the limit of their power. And they have no power when you are one with God. And when you take the decrees that have been given to us to use, that puts you one with God in that area. So you have power now. Use it if you have to. If you have any trouble, come talk to Anita.
Okay, we were speaking just a few moments ago about the diverticuli. These are basically little pouches in the walls of the intestines, and they're basically a herniation, where the lining of the intestine has been herniated or pushed out through the muscle structures that would form the intestine. As John's demonstrating there, you have a series of circular muscle structures that run the length of the intestinal tract, and you get a little thing pushing out like that, and that little pouch is known as a diverticulum, or if you got more than one, they're diverticuli, and the contents of these is what's known as the fecal lith. That's the old hardened fecal material that would be in there for perhaps many, many years. Now, one of the causative factors of a lot of the diverticuli is the improper posture of the body when you're defecating. You'll find that in countries where people squat in order to have a bowel movement, that you won't in the descending colon.
Excuse me just a minute. Thank you very much, Luke.
Thank you.
See you next week.
By the way, he'll be here on Tuesday.
Luke will be here Tuesday.
What I've been told is that in the countries of the world where people, as a rule, will squat to have a bowel movement, where the toilet might be just a little hole down in the floor, or maybe just out in the grass or whatever, that people will not tend to get the diverticuli in the descending colon. I believe they still tend to get some over in the ascending colon, but they will not get them in the lower part of the bowel, in the descending colon. Now, of course, in most of your Western cultures, we sit like this when we poop. We sit on the throne, and that's a very, very, very poor position for the body to have an easy and complete elimination. So the thing that you really want to do to have good bowel movement and not to hurt yourself in the process by straining and grunting and herniating yourself is to get into a squatting position if that's at all possible. Now, I learned this or heard this first from John, about 10 or 11 years ago, and given the fact that I've spent most of my time in the Western world, where you're dealing with your sort of standard toilet in the John. Well, you like to say in the loo. In the Fred. Okay. At any rate, my method's pretty simple. I just stand on the seat, and that works quite well. And if once you get the hang of it, if you got good flexibility in your knees and good balance, it's actually quite simple. And I've never fallen in or anything, so that works quite well for me. But I realize that's not practical for a lot of people for a number of reasons. So there are some alternative solutions that will at least get your feet up a little bit, so that you can be in at least an approximately squatting position. And Alan has got a little gadget here I think he wants to show you.
Back in 1990, a Chinese doctor in Perth told me I had to have my thighs higher than my hips, so I could use my bowels freely and do the wee-wees quickly. So I made toilet ladders back in Perth, and 11 weeks ago I made this one. I'll just show you how it works. It's my portable toilet ladder. Once you've got the legs out, they're fixed into position by these door locks and these marine stainless steel chrome-plated hinges, so it won't go rusty. So it's always free to use. It's marine ply, so that no matter where I am, I take with me. It's my portable toilet ladder, so I just carry in my bag, and it's with me all the time to take the toilet and do my movements. So if you'd like to have a look, I'll leave it up here for you to have a look at.
It doubles as a clipboard.
Or a writing board.
Portable desk.
Every mover and shaker should have one.
Are you taking orders?
This is Alan's own projection here.
If you want to have a look at it, I'll leave it up here so you can just have an examination and see what you think. So if you want to make one, just take the idea and it's all yours to keep forever. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
If you think of adopting Doug's method, always look to see if the bull is fastened down on both sides. I stepped on a couple and they were only fastened down on one side.
When I was in India, you never found a clean toilet seat. There's always somebody's shoe marks on top of the toilet seat, and usually they're quite muddy.
That's right.
And I've never been to India, so it wasn't me.
You'll have your chance, sir. If I have my way about it, you'll have your chance. Beautiful place. Okay. Let me be gentle. I don't know how to do that, really. But if I say it, the intent is there. There's an awful lot of misinformation in nearly every aspect of the healing profession. The Usui method of healing, better known as Reiki, is an ancient system which is rediscovered virtually in our time, given, I shall say, by revelation. This Usui method has been passed down through time to a lady by the name of Takata, who lived in Hawaii. I was privileged to be present at the time when witnesses to the following event took place. And these witnesses passed this on to me, where they were present when Takata, in the very closing days of her life, was responsible for ordaining, or shall we say, initiating or appointing her granddaughter, Phyllis Furumoto, to be the next Reiki Grand Master. Now, as it happened, since no appointment had been made up until that time, a lady from the United States by the name of Barbara Weber Ray assumed that she was to be the next appointed, shall we say, the next Reiki Grand Master. And she carried on as if she had been. And many people believe that she is the proper lineage for the Reiki system. The system has changed considerably from the time of Takata, but Phyllis Furumoto has dedicated herself to keeping the system pure. And therefore, the people who come down through Phyllis Furumoto, or those that she honors and appoints through her organization to continue on, this is the proper lineage of the Reiki system. We are privileged to have with us today one of the not a Grandmaster, but a Reiki Master. Janine Hersons, would you come up, please? Now, Janine has the responsibility of living her life according to the dictates of her heart. And because of her position, nobody has the right to question her in that area, because this is her position. And I'd like to turn the time over to Janine in a few minutes, wherein I would like to encourage each of you to become acquainted with this system of healing. How many in here are initiated to Reiki 1? Look at this, folks. Would you all please look at this? How many are initiated into Reiki 2? Are there any masters here? Okay, there's another one. Now this is exceedingly important that this be considered and looked at carefully. Now this is a system of being a channel for energies that come in through the administrator of that energy, that another person can use that energy to heal when they are deficient of energy. And this whole concept of Reiki is a very important concept. Okay? Now it so happens that there are ancient teachings which are quite magical. Which combine form or symbols, which combine chanting or voice, which combine with the entire body activity, along with the symbols and along with the voice. Let me give you one of many examples. In Hilo, Hawaii, once every year they have a big get-together where the different Hawaiian dance groups have a festival and compete for different particular ancient and modern dancing or hula type activity. In the old days, and I understand this, okay, I know what I'm talking about a little bit, that if you use your body in a certain position with that chant and with certain symbols, using your body to do that, you have magical command over the elements, over the rocks, over the wind, over the sunshine, over the sea, etc. And one time they had this ceremony there in Hilo, Hawaii, in this huge open pavilion under a blue sky, where they had the ancient rain dance that was done with the hula. And these people all trained for many weeks, many months, to bring out the ancient traditional hula under the auspices of trained kahunas to have an original rain dance. And this one group, which was trained properly, they came and they gave their rain dance, and within just a 5-minute period, you had huge black clouds coming from the north, from the south, from the east, and from the west, coming right over the top of that pavilion, and they had lightning and rain and thunder and everything, at which time half of the other contestants withdrew from the competition because they knew the power of the rain dance. It did exactly what it was controlled to do. Now in Reiki, you have certain symbols that when these symbols are used for the healing techniques, they work. not because the person sending those symbols necessarily works, but the symbols are a magical symbol. It's an ancient symbol that was given to the Reiki masters. And these work, and you have miracles that take place, even in the use of absent healing. Now, here's where you're commanding the body to heal properly, using these particular symbols. Now, you might say, well, that's not good. That's not good at all. But if I were to go into the room back here in the kitchen and I were to take one of those mangoes out and I use a knife on that mango to split that open so I can eat that mango properly, that's magic too, because you're using certain symbols, you're using a sharp knife edge, and you're using a fruit in order to consume that fruit. That's the same thing. There's no difference. It's learning to use the proper sounds, proper symbols, proper forms, and these things are magic. Everything in the physical universe that makes something work can be considered to be as magic. Okay? Now, some people don't like the word magic because it has negative overtones. Okay, everything has either positive and or negative overtones, and so look at everything as being a two-edged sword. What is the intent? What is the results? What are the outcomes? The intent is to be of service, to help to heal the human body. And this is the whole concept of, in my understanding, of the Reiki technique. So in the next little while, I want you to listen to Janine as she instructs you and corrects you on anything that I may not have said properly or might have said out of line from a position of a Reiki master. And then she has some things on her mind that she may want to share with you.
Thank you. It's good to hear it from you also, about the explanation of the Reiki and about the symbols. So it gives me a deeper understanding of what I knew. So thank you. The last 24 hours, or maybe a bit longer, I've been feeling around Reiki. It took me after that I did the course, after that I did instructor course, it took me several months to place Reiki in a different way in my life, because I had body electronics on one side and I had the Reiki on the other side. So I start with body electronics, and the Reiki classes were getting just a few classes anymore. But this year again, after integrating and living body electronics in a way more, I've been feeling Reiki has its place in my life, because I've been initiated as a Reiki master. And I always, when I start the class, I say, don't look at the word Reiki master as somebody who is above you, because if you put somebody really high above you, maybe you can fall and then you lay there and then they don't see you anymore. So the word master is being used because of maybe it's a title, but it is. I have it still difficult with that word master.
Assume it. Assume the virtue if you have it not.
Okay. It's in a way taking on the responsibility to teach people that they have their own master in themselves, and teaching them also the correct principles. Where I find the most important, in a way, it's the unconditional love and the gratitude towards everything what happens in life, and forgiveness. So in a way, all the laws that we use in body electronics, you can take it further also in Reiki. So I've been teaching that for a few years. One of the first initiation, it's what John is saying, it's healing the physical body. And yes, what I see, it's more than just healing the physical body. It's opening up Reiki also. Reiki means universal life energy. What means for me God, the light, universe. Didn't have the Reiki initiation, you do the first initiation, it brings you on a higher energy level. So does the second one, it brings you on a higher level of energy. What brings the responsibility and a demand on yourself, because it brings up faster, the past, faster to integrate everything what was suppressed. So yes, it brings a lots of energy so your body can heal quicker, but the emotions are coming up quicker also. And you see the connection where it starts, so you see sometimes in the mental body, it's not so strong, my personal experience, that was where I was looking for more in body electronics, but yes, it's on the different levels that it works. And for me, the most important what I see happening is really people are, in a way, are falling in love with each other in an unconditional way. And I think, oh, I get goosebumps. That's what's... If I did again Reiki, it was not my focus on healing the body, but it was my focus on opening the heart and let the energy flow from the heart. So the last 24 hours, or a bit longer, I've been feeling maybe we could use it here, the Reiki. And there is a Phyllis Ferromoto and the other Reiki masters, they agree on a certain amount of money for the first initiation. What's about, in Australian dollars? 5.500 Belgische frank. 300. 250, yeah. 250 Australian dollars. So the second degree is about 500 or 600, and the Reiki master degree is 10,000 American dollars. So, okay, 15, yeah. So I've just been feeling it, just to offer what I can to initiate in the degrees for people who really feel it from their heart, not coming from a place of, oh yeah, let's do something else, but really feel it. If this is the right time to do a Reiki initiation. And I've been feeling, I did my last class for a quarter of the money. I shouldn't do that. It took me a few months to get off that, to get off. It's been said you need to take the money, you need to exchange the money. But in my heart I didn't feel that. So I did my last initiation in Belgium for a quarter of the money. And it felt good. And I could see what was happening. And I was in peace with myself. And now I feel just to do it for free, because I feel it in my heart. And for me, it is important that whenever, whatever healing modality or whatever happens in life, that there is somebody who is a grandmaster, like say with Phyllis, and I don't take her authority away. But then it's like what we talked about the organization. If you make the organization more important than the people, then the organization should not be there anymore. So what I've been feeling is just, I feel my intuition, I feel my heart just to do this at that moment in time. I don't know what's going to happen down the road, but this is what I feel right now.
I hope you all understand that this is her gift of love to this group of body electronics instructors, people who are being trained in body electronics. I hope you all understand that. I hope you all understand that sometimes things are a little tight, and sometimes when you can have an extra little bag of tricks, shall we say, diplomas on the wall, and I understand that diplomas are available for them. And sometimes when some of you have come from where you've just given your all just to get here, you quit your jobs and everything else just to get here, and I understand that situation, and I'm terribly honored that you'd be here. But it's a wonderful thing to have an extra tool that will give you, in the eyes of the world, a certain degree of respectability. Oh, this person is trained in Reiki, and here is a very valid form of healing. And Janine understands that. As a Reiki master, she wants to promote Reiki, and she has the right, as a Reiki master, to give her gift of love for those that choose to receive it. Now, I don't want any commitments from any of you as to whether or not you want to partake of this very generous offer or whether you don't. I want you to think about it for a day or two. And we'll bring up this issue again, okay, in a day or two. And then you'll be able to make up your minds as to whether or not this is a path that you'd like to step on occasionally and have this gift of the Reiki initiation, the Reiki teachings given to you, that you may benefit from it. I'd love to see this go into Africa. Now, why do you think that I do this? And say, I'm not taking anything away from body electronics. What I'm doing is increasing your ability to be of service to your people. You see what I'm saying? It's not, let's not just drive our stakes so deep in saying this is the only method of healing. Now, this is a gift, and it's a gift that you should consider carefully, and if you feel this is something you should do, I would take advantage of it. It's in no way tearing anything away from body electronics. Years ago, when I was in Maui, Hawaii, I was a follower of Jesus. Later on, I went to Chicago, and I taught body electronics to a group of 500 people down on the Lake Michigan waterfront in a huge hotel, the Lakefront Towers. And after it was over and done with, there were a lot of people there came up to me and said, do you know what you're saying, and do you know what you're doing, and are you aware that you're teaching the same thing that Saint Germain taught? Do you know of Saint Germain? I said, no, never heard of him. I know that there's an Indian chief by the name of Saint Germain up in Minnesota. And there's a town up there named Saint Germain that I've been through and had a little cup of coffee there and went on through. But I know that their name Saint Germain is familiar to the people up north. Well, do you realize that you're teaching the same thing that Saint Germain teaches? I said, I don't know who Saint Germain is. Have you read his books? Never read his book, never heard of him before. Never heard of him at all. You don't know Saint Germain? No. You don't know his works? No. So they loaded me down with all this literature and stuff to take home, which I as I mentioned before, I'm a little slow in responding. So I read a couple of these things, and I thought, that's not quite what I expected. And I started searching and searching and searching for the purpose of contradicting and finding fault with what I was reading, because I was sure this was a bunch of nonsense. And then I started talking to some people who were involved, and I began to realize that there's something here, and this is a very real thing. And this bothered me a lot, because then I felt, well, if Saint Germain's teachings is true, then I'm being not true to the teachings of Jesus. And so I read more material on all the history on Jesus, all the archaeological proof, all of the proof coming from the Jews' teaching, all the works coming from Josephus' teachings, on down the line, every religion I could get my hands on. And then I got upset, because I couldn't make my mind up as to whether to follow Jesus or Saint Germain. Now that's a stupid thing for most people to say, well, John, of course, just follow both of them. Well, I didn't feel that way. I was kind of a one-way railway, you know. You do it one way, you do it right, it has to be right. And so I started praying about this. And one day I had the most beautiful experience, and I know that somebody upstairs has a great sense of humor, because here's this great big pie graph in front of me. And being a mathematician, I mean, there's nothing simpler than a pie graph for a grade school student. And here, you know, and so here I am being a grade school student in spiritual things, and here this big pie graph was right in the air, right in front of me. And I looked at that pie graph, and then I had a line through the diameter, through it horizontally, and another vertically, and then all these little slices down below. And then the upper part here was labeled Jesus. The upper part here was labeled Saint Germain. Then above it was this most beautiful scroll I ever saw in my life, which said unity in diversity. And I looked at that, and later on I came in touch with the Baha'i teachings, unity in diversity. And I looked at that and said, because the same scroll that was here in the air in front of me was the same one that you have in the Baha'i faith with Baha'u'llah. And I looked at that, and I'm still scratching my head with Baha'u'llah, okay? But I'm putting it over here because I haven't had time to read about 15 books I have of his at home that I intend to read this summer. Now, I looked at that, and then this beautiful voice spoke out that has guided me over the years. Now is the time to bring the teachings of all of the great masters of the world into one. I looked at that, and my heart melted. I didn't have to say, here's Jesus is right and Saint Germain is wrong. And I had to just sit back and look at my stupidity for a long, long time, and I realized how darkened my human mind was, because I had to take truth and put that in little departments rather than encompassing the whole. That was a great lesson for me. I later shared that with Doug. This is the time to bring all the teachings of all the great masters into one. And I thought to myself, and then after being all tensed up, and intense on which one should I follow, you follow both of them. You follow all of them, but you have to learn who they are. And so this is, one of them was Saint Germain, the other was Jesus. There's others down here that I didn't find out about yet at that time. And I thought, I better open my mind a little bit and start looking around, see if there's somebody else down there that's down here, who is an ascended master who's made the grade. We found a few, and we found out what their teachings are. And this has been a great revelation to me. That doesn't mean I've mastered their teachings, but I have understood that the teachings are there for us to follow, which we try to do. Now that is the same thing with the work with the Usui method of healing, which Reiki is. And I urge you also to get the history of this great work. Learn it and apply it. And put that into your, what I call humorously, your bag of tricks. Because the greater amount of knowledge you have about healing, the greater your ability to be a comfort and a source of joy to the people that you work with. Because people will come to you and depart from you very happy and well pleased, because you gave them a little flour for their forehead, or and their headache went away, and then maybe you gave them a little Reiki treatment and their kidneys quit paining them, and maybe you give them a little body electronics and their numb feet come alive. How about that? That doesn't matter. Let's do what we can to be of service to mankind and not be rigidly involved in only one area of healing. Sometimes a homeopathic remedy will be proper. Sometimes acupuncture will be wonderful to help to heal a person. And so let's not just throw all your eggs into one basket and say this is the only way to go, when there's many, many ways to go, from aromatherapy on down the line to Reiki. So I want to share this with you. And it's just something here, hopefully, that most of you already are aware of Reiki, and many of you are already initiated. But I hope this adds some depth to your understanding of what you're involved in. Anita, what did you want to say?
Nothing. I think this is just a really wonderful opportunity for all of you to just add to, like Janine said, opening the heart and take in another tool to help others. So.
Janine.
That's it. No. Yeah, I think everything has been said at this moment, and just feel with your heart, because that's what Reiki is, if this is for you.
Any questions for Janine?
I'm just overwhelmed at the moment because it's something that I've been thinking of doing, and when I returned, and I just can't believe that this offer is there for me right now. A couple of the questions I had was, did you have any conflict, or can you explain your conflict with Reiki and body electronics? Because I know people who are Reiki initiated, and they just seem to have a lot of trouble with the concept of the pain that you have to go through in body electronics, and that you shouldn't have to go through that sort of pain. It should be just very simple, and it's all just done with energies and things. And how do you know the lineage of a teacher in Reiki? Like you say, it needs to come from certain people. How do you know, to tell other people?
Sometimes you need to go back you need to go back to the Reiki masters where it started to see from where you're coming from. That's the answer on the... You need to ask your Reiki master. So from where it's coming from. Phyllis, there was a linear... the word escapes me, but the lineage, but no, there is an organization that was built up. It's the lineage, no, it was in Holland and in Santa Fe. At a certain, it was at a certain point, the organization was around Phyllis, and they decided, when you were not from that certain lineage coming from Phyllis, that you would not be a Reiki master. So Phyllis, at a certain point, stopped, and just she didn't want to be in the organization, because for her it was not the organization, it was not the person, it was the energy of God, and that's where she connects with. And I had a 4-day weekend with Phyllis, and a 2.5 day with Phyllis, and there is that feeling of, I know you are in the same energy. That's how she doesn't know from where you're coming. It's the energy where she connects with, at a much deeper and higher level. It's not on paper, it's not with words. And yes, it's good to know from where you're coming. The first question was, that escaped me.
Have you had any conflict with pain?
Yeah, if people who have the Reiki, it's like walking on pink clouds. If you do a Reiki weekend, it's like, it's heaven. It's very soft, it's very gentle. Like I say, you fall in love with the other people. It's so gentle. And yes, body electronics is quite painful. So some people, I've initiated hundreds of people. Just a few, Bridget is one of them, just a few are coming to body electronics. Because they say it can be in another way. They don't want to go through the pain. Because it is gentle Reiki. But for me it was not enough. And I tell them it's not enough. And they get quite upset with me. Also the other Reiki masters get quite upset with me. But I feel you need to go through the pain. And yes, in the meantime, you can enjoy having like a Reiki treatment or having a Reiki initiation or just having the help of the energy. When I sit here sometimes and I feel so much unconsciousness coming up because I'm quite high sensitive. Sometimes I need to go out and I don't say it's my unconsciousness that comes up also. I can't get on anymore. There is that conflict, and yes, there is that. I bring it together. I can enjoy the Reiki. When I'm sitting there, I'm doing Reiki. And it brings me up again in an higher level of energy. So I can transform the unconsciousness. And I go through memories. Because if you go through the unconsciousness, we all know you're like falling asleep. But for me, it's not like suppressing it when I use the Reiki. It's bringing it up even more. Because sometimes I start burning just with having a Reiki treatment. And yes, maybe you need to go first through lots of body electronic sessions before, with Reiki, you have that results of the burning. Because that's what I've experienced. This morning when we talked about the firewalk, I had the last months a few times when I couldn't sleep because my feet were burning. I walked twice over the fire 8-9 years ago, and my feet were burning and burning. So I keep my body still, but I place just my hands on my body and let the Reiki in, and I can feel it's like heating up more and more. And I do this just when I sit in the seat, and it's not concentrating that you need to do with Reiki. It's just pleasant, and it's just filling yourself up, expanding, growing constantly.
Yes, I don't believe that it has to be a conflict, Lynn. It just is, you know. With body electronics, the pain is there. With Reiki, the pain is not there. You know, if you can move from moment to moment with things, I don't think it has to be conflict in it.
With TM, for example, for many people the pain is not there. But when it's practiced properly, the pain will be there, and so will the healing, and so will the energy, the vibration of energy. Now, in Reiki, when it's applied properly and the person is ready for it, when they're psychologically and physiologically prepared, they will get the burning in their body, as spoken of here. And when they get through the burning, they feel that gentle vibration going through their body. Now, many people in Reiki don't want the pain. Stay up here, Gloria.
She had the pain with Reiki.
Okay. But the people, when they're ready, they have that pain with Reiki. Gloria is a Reiki teacher. Reiki 1.
When I was first initiated to Reiki during the weekend, it was on the second day, I went through a tremendous healing from childhood trauma, and the pain started on the Sunday when I went through the Reiki treatment. I went home quite spaced out, and for the next 2 days I had extreme pain while I was going through my healing. I had to have the assistance again of the Reiki master, plus Ian, my husband, and a friend to help me go through to bring the complete healing through. And I still, from time to time, when I'm having Reiki, experience pain because it's a trauma that I'm bringing up from childhood traumas.
Now that energy coming into Gloria from the Reiki, the administration of the proper Reiki, then she takes and uses that energy to bring out the memories, which bring out the pain, which is embedded in the crystal, and the healing takes place. But she's ready for it psychologically and physiologically, or it would not happen.
That's what it is, yes. So if you're not nutritionally prepared, it's more gentle. And if you decide to do the initiation, so like Reiki 1 brings you more in the body, that you have an experience on a cellular level, really, really physical. And some people get quite a few days or sometimes a few weeks in a good healing crisis. So if you want more, so go for the Reiki. And if you are scared, maybe what I feel is, I think you shouldn't be scared for it, because there is so much energy, there is so much love, there is so much holding from the whole group, that you're gonna integrate the Reiki initiation much quicker than when you should do it with a few people outside of this 6 weeks.
I just have a story to share about Reiki. It's come to my life several times, and I keep putting it up on the shelf, leaving it alone. But when I was in Cairns, I went out to the Great Barrier Reef, and on the way in the boat, I met a German woman who told me a story about it that impressed me quite a lot. She had met a Reiki master and befriended this woman and helped her a lot, just kind of with her spiritual orientation, because she was in a time of confusion in her life. And she actually lived a couple 100 kilometers away from this woman. And upon parting, this teacher said, if you ever need help, just call me. And this woman is very energetically sensitive, let's say. And she was having a lot of trouble with difficult nightmares, and it sounded like a lot of entity involvement to me. It was very, kind of wild. And she went through a period where this was intensifying, and she couldn't share it with her friends. Her friends just thought she was crazy and wouldn't talk to her on that level. So it got to the point where she couldn't bear it anymore, and she called up this woman and said, well, this is it, I need help. And that was all that was said, basically, and she went on with her life, and over the period of the next couple of weeks, everything intensified for her greatly, just incredible nightmares and all kinds of things going on. But to make the story short, after 2 weeks, her eyes turned from solid brown to green.
Thank you very much.
I'm feeling really emotional because I came here with a lot of conflict with what I've been doing in the last few months and being introduced to body electronics about 18 months ago. And when I heard John speaking about giving his blessing to Reiki, which I've been involved with, I only went to Reiki 1 level, but whenever I was helping somebody, I always used Reiki because it was such a good modality. A person had to lie down for an hour, didn't they? I mean, there was a person on the run, and that was a good way to get them to be still for a little while. And but what I felt when John was speaking and when you were speaking, Janine, was just utmost gratitude. I've had a really bad experience in this life, which reminded me of the torture that I'd had in another life about speaking out and about what I believe. And I can't tell you what it means to have the sharing that we've just had, and I'm extremely grateful, because I know that where we're guided to do something personally, and then someone is telling us, this is a really good way, you should be doing it like this or whatever, I have a bit of a natural resistance to that. And that was the same with Reiki, with the money. I had a really strong resistance to paying $500 to do something that God had already given me. So I wanted to share my gratitude and the expansion that it gave me sitting there. I just was overwhelmed, and thank you very much.
Hi, twice in a day, and I hate this thing. This is a difficult one. I'm in a little bit of conflict at the moment. I have received Reiki, and it was beautiful, and I think what Janine is offering is a wonderful gift. When we did the body electronics course in England, Peter Aziz was finding that people who had been initiated into Reiki had started to form a closed loop in the pineal. And he I don't know how he worked it out, but he was finding this in all the people that had started the Reiki initiations, and found it was to do with the giving of half a symbol, such that the power would remain with the Reiki master. Could you comment on that? Because, as I say, it's causing a lot of conflict within me to get two such opposing sides of information from two people who I would put faith in. Help.
I just missed something there because I was... so he was saying that the power is kept by the Reiki master.
Some of the power, because only half the symbol is shown, is that correct? I mean, I don't know much about Reiki, but he showed us what the Reiki initiates were given and said, look, this is only half the symbol, and therefore your power to some extent will continue to be with the Reiki master that has initiated you.
We checked the symbols with Phyllis, so I'm 100, maybe 200% sure that these are the original symbols that Phyllis is keeping. That's why she's the Grand Master, that nothing is changed in the symbols. And yes, there is a lot of change in symbols, and there is a lot going on around the money, around Reiki and all that. The power, each person can go for the first, the second and the third degree. It's not like you are a Reiki master and nobody else can be a Reiki master. There is a feeling, and that's for the second degree also, but that's like a sharing. Are you ready to take your next step? Are you ready to take the second degree? Do you feel ready to be initiated in Reiki Master? Because you accelerate and you go much quicker, and what you didn't integrate or didn't want to look at first initiation, you're going to have at the second. And if you don't want to look at the second, you're going to have it at the third. And that's not to make you scary. It's just like what we are willing to look at, we can integrate. But if we say no, and we take on much more energy, because that's what it is. Reiki Master channels the universal energy, channels God. And that's what flows in the body, in the initiation. So that's what's opening up the chakras, what's opening up the energies. So you can channel more energy for yourself to become more the God in you. So I hope I could...
Thank you. Still a little bit of conflict there on why Peter is finding that the people that have done the Reiki initiations are developing these closed loops in the pineal. Maybe John could comment on that.
I've dealt with lots of Reikis, and I haven't found closed loops in the pineal gland. No. Maybe I've got one and I haven't seen it. But I haven't seen it. I've checked with people, and I have people with lots of pineal problems with lots of people, but not limited to the Reiki people. Peter might be running across a whole bunch of people simultaneously that all have these little problems in the pineal gland. Now, you'll have that from time to time. You'll have a run on sore necks, and then you'll have a run on ingrowing toenails, and then you'll have a run on sore throats, and then you'll probably have a run on loops in the pineal gland. I don't know.
very brave. A third question. The other thing I'd be interested to have an answer on is I'm fortunate enough to have been given the gift to do spiritual healing, and I just wondered what the difference was in the energy that you channel between Reiki and that.
To me, there is no difference, because many people have the natural ability to channel the same energy that takes place in a Reiki, that a person is initiated to in Reiki, where they have their channels cleared out. You follow me? The difference is that the Reiki has access to symbols, which in some cases accelerate the healing modality and is a very useful tool for absent healing.